During World War II, Slovenia was occupied by Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Fascist Hungary. Between 1942 and 1945, the German army conscripted between 60,000 to 70,000 Slovenians into its army. 10,000 Slovenians were killed during that period, and 15,000 of them came back home as invalids. Of those who returned, the vast majority of them were treated very badly.
Again, a story which was not spoken after the Second World War, namely the forcible conscription into the German army, into Wehrmacht. You probably know something about the history of the Second World War on the Slovenian territory. The whole Slovenian territory was divided by 4 occupiers. We speak about 4 because we have to put here also the independent Croatia. So the northern part and the central part belonged to the German authorities. The southern part to Italians, and the eastern part to Hungarians, and only a small part, let us say from Brežice towards Zagreb, a small part of only 5 villages belonged to the independent Croatia. And all the occupiers started with a severe denationalization, meaning Germanization, Italianization. And on the territory which belonged to German occupiers, namely the Upper Carniola, Gorenska, and Lower Styria, Štajerska, the whole organization started towards bringing Slovenian young men into the German army. So on the territory of Štajerska and Gorenska lived around 800,000 inhabitants. And when they started the strong Germanization, the 2 organizations, so the Styrian Homeland Association and Carinthian People's Association were formed, and just to Germanize the whole territory and to Germanize the people. And already in the first weeks of occupation, the cities, the streets, even the mountain peaks, they got the German names. And also the people had to change, they had to Germanize their names. I know, Ivan was Johann, then also the spelling of the name was in German way. So everything was done in a way to Germanize the whole Slovenian territory in less than 5 years. So in 1942, so this was the Kärntner Volksbund, so this Carniolan People's Association. So have you listed yet? So if you didn't list for this organization, you couldn't get a job, you couldn't get the ration cards. So nearly the majority of the people, they enlisted to Steirische Heimatbund and Kärntner Volksbund. And both these organizations, they had their military organizations called Wehrmannschaft, so-called Wehrmani. And around 100,000 Slovenians had to enroll into these units. They were they were not armed, predominantly not armed. I mean, in Upper Carniola, they didn't have weapon. In Styria, they did fight together with the German police, with the German army against the partisan groups. And the people who had to join the Wehrmannschaft were either younger, before they were to go to the army, or older, meaning 45, so from 18 to 45. This is important because so we show here some Wehrmannschaft units from Škofja Loka. This is from Upper Carniola. And they were also sent to special schools for training the leaders, and so they also have these passes, Wehrmannschaft pass, and so these were the first half-military or paramilitary groups to which the Slovenians were forced to be organized. And then, at the end of 1941, on the territory of Lower Styria and Upper Carniola, the so-called military area commands were formed, and they started to prepare the list of young men being born from young men and let's say from generation being born from 1900 to 1924. So that was already in January 42, starting December 41, then 42 January. And then also the civil administration of Lower Styria and of Upper Carniola, they issued some decrees on Wehrrecht, Military Act rights, and Reichsarbeitsdienst, state labor service, RAD, we say RAD. So from July 42, the first young men from Lower Styria were sent to RAD units, RAD groups, so state labor service. So in these units, they were like paramilitary groups, paramilitary service units. They learn German commands. They learn to serve with the weapon, but they didn't carry the weapon all the time. And then finally, the young men from Lower Styria were mobilized, and in July 42 already from Lower Styria, and from Upper Carinthia the conscription started in January 1943. And as you can see, in Lower Styria, generations born from 1908 to 1929 were mobilized, and in Gorenska, in Upper Carniola, only the generations from 1916 to 1926 were mobilized. And so firstly, the generations 23, 24, 1923, 24 were mobilized and sent to state labor units. So the ones who have already, so this is the decree on mobilization of the generation 1923-24 in Kran, in Upper Carniola. And so when they had to make the registration with the military commands, they had to fill in a lot of lists of papers, also what are their special interests, what are they good at, and also also which units they would want to join. But actually, all the Upper Karelians, they wanted to be in Luftwaffe, but probably no one came to Luftwaffe. They were all in mountain groups. And so when they were called in, they got like this information, ein Berufungsbefehl, and they had to come to the military barracks, and soon they were sent to RAD barracks, somewhere in Austria, predominantly somewhere in Austria, because Lower Styria and Upper Carniola, they both belonged to 18 military districts. And so RAD units were all around Austrian territory, let us say. So, the conscripts are leaving Kranj in January 1943. So we have quite some photos in our collections being done by the civil authorities in Kranj at that time. So see the center, and they're leading towards the railway station, and saying farewell from their families. And then they came to these RAD groups. We again have quite a lot of material. So predominantly when we were speaking to forced conscript, we spoke about the items, but later on we actually wrote that they do have a lot of photos, they have ego documents, meaning different letters, diaries as well. And so in 2005 we made a film. It was also on national TV at that time, and with testimonies of 45 conscripts who were talking about their destinies. And actually at that time the topics has opened, like already in the 90s with the new Slovenia, with the state of Slovenia, the topics have been opened little by little, and so was with this forced conscription. And the first exhibition which we made in Kranj, at that time, that was 1991, I was working in Kranj. My mentor was Dr. Jože Dežman, and we prepared an exhibition on forced conscription, and that was the first exhibition after the Second World War on this topic. And there were so many people who came to the exhibition. There were so many people who wanted to speak about their destinies and the destiny of their fathers, brothers, uncles. And at that time we collected a lot of materials. But later on, when we were doing the interviews, and still now with the field research, we do get predominantly ego documents, not three-dimensional items, not that many. So the civil authorities also went to visit the young RAD man that was a part of propaganda also to come and to visit them. So the young man had two documents in the units, the wear pass, which stayed with the unit, and the Soldbuch, which was kept by the soldier, and he had this. And we have quite many of these sold books, and from these books we can then speak about the destiny of the people. Again, the German soldiers, they wear this Erkennungsmarke, this recognizing tag and around their bills, and it consists of two parts. So with the number, with the unit, and with the blood group O. So this one had the blood number, O. 0. And if the soldier was killed or so, they cracked this in half and they left this part with the body, and they took this to put it into the list that he was either dead or missing. So so as I said, we have a lot of photos. We made a lot of personal stories. We were able to put them together. So we have the whole story of Franz Garcia, for example, from Upper Cornilla, and many others from the Atlantic, and the soldiers in their units, they printed a newspaper of the Upper Corinthians, the Heimatgruß. So in this newspaper, the families and the community sent regards to the soldiers on the front, and also from these newspapers we could learn about some destinies. We could learn about the people, because you have to know that after the Second World War, those were the topics no one would speak openly, and there was no let's say no public discussions, and there was no numbers how many people were forcibly conscripted into the German army, into the Wehrmacht, and only lately, let us say 20 years, we're trying to do these numbers. So I made a list for all Upper Cornillans, and I succeeded to make a list up to 12,000. So, but probably there were between 14,000 to 15,000, and also there are not a lot of archival material. So I also went to Berlin, to the Bundesarchiv, and went through all these cartotheks. I went through all the archives and tried to find the documents for all these young men. But young men came from Erada units into the military units on the front, and very quickly the Slovenian newspapers were full of these obituaries for the fallen soldiers. And
when was that? When they were printing that? Was that during the war?
Newspapers, yes. So these obituaries are in Gorinsky, in 43, 45 are these obituaries, because at a certain point the editors didn't want to publish any longer obituaries because there were that many. It could be only the pages of obituaries. So at some point in 1944 they didn't put into newspapers anymore of these obituaries.
Was it also because maybe the families were getting pressure from, let's say, the partisans, that they're...
Not only you see, when these young men were forced to join the German army, because they had already, when the first conscription started, the German authorities said, well, you have to go, otherwise your family will be persecuted, they will be sent to concentration camps, they will be sent away, they will be sent to forming camps, and a lot of young men, they didn't want to make any choice between their families, and the majority of them went into the army, into the Wehrmacht units, but a lot of them tried to find the first possibility to escape from the units. There were a lot of deserters. For example, from Upper Cornelia, out of 11,000 men, more than 2,000 escaped from their units. But not all of them could escape. See, I was speaking to quite a lot of them who said that they didn't have the possibility. Either they were dead away in some territories, or they couldn't.
If they did escape, who did they join after when they escaped?
Yeah. So they. So sometimes they fled over, meaning that they escaped from their units and they ran over to, for example, in Soviet Union, because the majority of the Slovenians, they had to serve in the Eastern Front. They were sent to Eastern Fronts, and the ones who escaped from there, or deserted from their units, they escaped to Soviet units, saying, okay, we are the Slavs, they are the Slavs, we will find the way. And some of them, they did join the Red Army and other Soviet units. Some were the prisoners of war camps, and some returned later on with some Yugoslav groups. So there were a lot of prisoner camps in France as well. A lot of Slovenians were in Marseille, for example, in different, and they came back from Marseille to partisan groups in French resistance. We know a lot of names. We know all by their names from this, and for three of them, the French people are trying to get some order, some high French medal for their bravery and being in the resistance groups. So they also went to, so the Slovenians who escaped from their German units, they also, so the ones, this is a very interesting story, the ones who were captured in Normandy, they were brought to England, actually to prisoner of war camp near Edinburgh, Scotland, and they returned around Christmas time, 1944, with a convoy of ships to Italy, to partisan base, and then returned to Split and to the Lemesha as a 5th partisan group brigade, and they went from Split to Slovenia on foot, fought in different battles, and came to Slovenia on the 16th of April 1945, meaning 14 days before the end of the Second World War. Some escaped before from their units when they were on leave, when they returned home. Before going to the battles, every soldier could get a 40-day leave. And some of them were able to come to Slovenia because predominantly they were only allowed to go to Klagenfurt, not over, because that was because of this territory was called the Partisangebiet, the partisan area. And then they joined the Gorinska domobranci, Gorinska self-defense, also Chetnik groups, also partisans here in Slovenia, but the majority of them came to different prisoner of war camps, and they were returning home after the general amnesty on August the 3rd, 1945. So this one was also this amnesty was also for the forcibly mobilized into the German army. And here are the basic facts. So 60 to 70,000 Slovenians fought in the German army, forcibly fought. They were forced to go there. And 10,000, at least 10,000 were killed, more than 15,000 returned home invalids, and after the war their status was very bad. They were treated as second-class citizens. They couldn't get jobs, they couldn't get any loans to build houses, etc., etc. And they were interrogated by the security police until the 60s, 70s. I know a man whose father came nearly the last forcibly mobilized to come home was in 1955. 10 years after the end of the war, he came home. And each time when Tito was coming to Brdo, that's the area near Kranj, and he came there to that estate, he was imprisoned. He was imprisoned and family never knew whether he will return home or not. And they were not allowed to organize after the war. They were not allowed to make a society or something. And they were put many times in prison. Many times. And only after 1991, they could make an association of forcibly mobilized Slovenians. And then for a while, 6 different organizations were working, but at the moment only the Upper Carniolan organization in Kranj is still working. And in 1995, they finally got the status of victims of war. So they had to fight until 1995 to get the status, so that their status was recognized, that actually they were forced to join the German army, and that so that they had to choose between the family and themselves, and so at the moment I only know a few, because as you know, 1926 are the youngest born, so this is actually the way how they. But they succeeded in putting up some memorials, some memory tablets. This is one in Kranj, and all around Slovenia there are more than 100. So, and the families of the forcibly conscripted still come together, still write, still a new stories of the forcibly conscripted are found. So a few years ago we published the last book, and so we were able, and we are still able to collect the stories and we try to encourage also the people from Lower Styria to do the research, and of course we try to find some support in Europe through European funds, because the topic of forcibly conscription is the European topic, because not only the Slovenians were forcibly conscripted, also the Polish people, also the people from Luxembourg, from Alsatia, from Lorena were forcibly mobilized, and apart from Belgium. So there are a lot of people who would or could speak the same story as our forcibly conscripted. So during our researches, we also get some items, predominantly of personal origin. Again, the same as we found in one from the mass grave. Again, the cutlery, then some pots, some ladders. Then this one is very interesting. This one was made in prisoner of war camp. One of the forcibly conscripts was in a prisoner of war camp, and he made an inscription on this pot. So actually, this was a pot to eat from, like this. So, and he made an inscription. He made some mountains, some stork coming home, and again we have a story of his destiny in a way. Then we have some items like some rucksacks, German rucksacks from the forcibly conscripted man. Again, he survived Normandy. He came to Edinburgh, to this prisoner of war camp, and he returned home with the 5th Partisan Brigade, going, as I said, from Liverpool in a convoy to Italy, and then from Split to Slovenia. So there are, as I said, there are many different items. For example, some documents again, but predominantly all these are given now by the families. So some passes again of soldiers, and again we usually stay in, for example, some dictionaries and so, and these were the personal belongings of forcibly mobilized. We do a lot of research into the documents, especially on internet sites of this German organization. More than 4 million documents are already online, and we as well try to find more stories about the Slovenian conscript. So hopefully in a few years we'll be able to do some these European projects to finally find out what was the number of forcibly conscripted. That's why we still say from 60 to 70, we cannot say the right number, but we are not that many who research these topics, and that's why it takes time. So thank you very much for listening to me. I will stop with this. Do you have any questions?
Are you doing the excavation, or is it called archaeology now when you dig up the grave?
I'm a historian working in the museum. Actually, this sort of work is done by Uroš. So he will explain to you. Tomorrow. So we, in the museum, we deal with the second part, not the excavation, but then researching the items, making the story and displaying this. Yeah.
So I've got a bunch of related questions. The first one, were they actually fighting in combat, or were they in combat support positions?
Yeah. Firstly, they were in the units behind the battlefields, but as they were trained for half a year in these hinterland units, and then they were sent to the battles, yes, and mostly to the Eastern Front. The majority of them actually fought in Ukraine and in Belarusia then. And so those were the older generations, meaning the younger generations being conscripted from August 43 and later. They were predominantly sent to the Western Front, to France or so, yeah.
So, maybe related. How do the Germans view the Slovenians as Slavic? But it sounds like they're treating them differently than other Slavs.
In the documents which I read about the treatment of Slovenians in the units, they were not treated equally. They were perhaps the lower Styrians from Styria, they were treated a bit better. But the upper Carnelians not, because in all these documents said they cannot speak German, they don't understand the orders, a lot of them try to escape, etc. And a lot of them were sent to prison. Some were also beheaded. Some were shot as well. So they treated, this mobilization as a part of Germanization. And they were never treated equally in the units. Yeah.
Yeah, my brother-in-law was conscripted in the army, the German army, and he was in training to be a machine gunner on the front. And the sergeant told him, he says, when you leave training, you throw away your papers, and when you get to the nearest German base, you tell them you're a cook. And that's how he survived the war. Because machine gunners lasted about a week at the time of the war.
But I have two diaries, and the owners of these two diaries were the machine gunners. And they all the time they write, as a machine gunner, everybody's shooting at me. Yes, all the time. And so, through these diaries, we learn about the death. We learn about the attitude towards the other members of the units, because at that time it was the wish of all, it was to survive. So to find a way to survive. And at a certain point, it didn't matter whether you were German or Luxembourgian or French, you tried to survive. Yeah.